Mr. Slivovsky, are you with us? Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect. Okay. So good morning to all. Welcome to the online debate, winners and losers of the pandemic, the Visegrad outlook. We are very happy that you chose to be with us today, either here as a Zoom audience or following us via online streaming, or maybe even listening to this as a podcast later on. This event is held as a part of a project that was supported by the International Visegrad Fund and is co-organized by the 4 project partners that are, and I'd like to name them in here very briefly. News portal EURACTIV Czech Republic as the lead partner of the project, EURACTIV Poland, EURACTIV Slovakia, and a think tank Political Capital from Hungary. So I want to use this opportunity to thank them for an excellent cooperation. My name is ZUZANA GABRIŽOVÁ. I'm the editor-in-chief of EURACTIV Slovakia, and I will have the pleasure to moderate the debate today. So few technical remarks still. As I mentioned, we are streaming this event on social media of all project partners, and we are also recording it, and it will be made available afterwards in the form of Zoom video or later as a podcast, and we are going to hold it in English without translation. As for the flow of the event, this will be a moderated debate with our speakers in the first part, with the possibility of asking questions through the Q&A functionality that you can find here in the Zoom at the bottom part of your screen. So feel free to jump in with any questions or maybe even comments that you might have. I will try to get to those once they arrive or in the second half. I'm very pleased that we have managed to get here 4 very distinguished speakers today, and let me now introduce them to you. So it's Ms. DANUŠE NERUDOVÁ, economist, rector of Mendel University in Brno from Czech Republic. Good morning.
Good morning.
With us today is also Ms. ÁGOTA SCHARLE, senior researcher and executive partner of Budapest Institute from Hungary. Good morning to you as well.
Good morning to you too.
We have here also with us Ms. MIRIAMA SVETKOVSKÁ. Until recently, she was the director of the implementation unit in the Office of Government of the Slovak Republic, which is a unit that is tasked with monitoring and supporting the implementation of reforms by the ministries. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation.
And last but not least, here with us is also Mr. Pavel Slivovsky, head of strategic team of Polish Economic Institute from Warsaw. Good morning to you. You need to unmute your mic. We cannot hear you.
Thank you very much for inviting.
Good morning. I'll just need to add that Mr. Slivovsky is stepping in for the director of Polish Economic Institute, Mr. PIOTR ARAK, who was called on to an important meeting this morning. So that's the situation here. So the topic of today's panel, of today's debate, will focus on the weaknesses and, in some rare cases, also probably strengths of social and economic fabric of our countries, which the pandemic has somehow exposed. Those vulnerabilities that were perhaps somehow suspected, or we even knew about them, but in many cases they had not qualified as a primary concern or as a political priority before. So we will talk about how our countries, economies and societies and public policies perform under this pressure, which is kind of an unprecedented in nature, and not just in macroeconomic terms, but rather in a wider context. So the aim today would be to try to pinpoint the long-lasting consequences and trends that can be expected, to talk about what is being done as a response to the crisis by our respective countries, and maybe what should be done or should be done differently or should be done better to take more the lessons learned from the current situation into account. Arguably, there will be many commonalities between our countries in the region, but we will also look for some differences, specificities, and special approaches that we can identify. So I'll suggest let's start with some basic diagnostics to use the pandemic language, and we'll see whether we will find some common features there. And I would like to start in the Czech Republic with Ms. NERUDOVÁ. You are a member of an expert group called CoroNERV 20, which brings together experts from various fields looking into how to minimize the damages caused by the pandemic. And I wrote a statement that you put out recently that said that, I quote, Czech society is in the most serious situation since November 1989. So in your view and in your expertise, what are the biggest concerns in Czech Republic in this moment? Do you see what are the biggest challenges? What are your personal biggest concerns? And maybe if you see any winners at all in this situation, in your opinion, Ms. NERUDOVÁ, please.
Thank you very much for the question. I think I will start from 5 points, which I think are extremely important to have them in the mind. And as I have been thinking about those 5 points, I do not think that it's just a specific of the Czech Republic. I think that those points are varied in broader context, not only for Visegrad countries, but also for the whole EU. Therefore, let me briefly talk about those 5 things which in fact are very important with respect to the situation we now have. We see COVID as a great accelerator of changes. It has revealed strong sides of our society and economics, but it also has revealed weaknesses. And our task is to come up with a new model, with a new economic model, which will be functioning, because the COVID is gonna live with us forever. It's nothing which will disappear this year or next year. And I think that we should urge people to know that we need the thinking that after COVID we will get into a normal life, that it's something which seems to be a fairy tale, because the accelerator has changed everything, society and the economics. So we are searching for a new model. So the first point I would like to speak about is the change and transformation. We need to transform the way we are thinking. We need to change our thinking. And then, as I said, we are searching for a new economic model, because our society, since Second World War, we have been fixated purely on GDP growth. And this COVID crisis revealed that it has really weaknesses. You have been, or we have been, all the Visegrad countries, even all the EU, have been facing the situation in the spring, where we have been critically missing things as face masks and the other things which were necessary for the fight with COVID, due to the fact that we have been fixating on the GDP growth, just purely GDP growth, searching at cheap labor power. Therefore, we have to change our way of thinking, and we have to concentrate on sustainability. And the concept of sustainability should really be reflected in all the policies the states are doing. So we are searching for a new economic model which will really take into account sustainability. Another point is trust. Trust is extremely important in the fight with COVID. Once I have been speaking with the person who was a Nobel laureate in genetics, and we have been given the question what the world would be without science. And my question is, it would be world without future. And I think that we really need to renew a trust in science. We have to fight with fake news and populism, because it's really the weak side of our fight with COVID. Therefore, the renewal of trust in governments, renewal of trust in society, and renewal of trust in science. That's an essential feature of our fight with COVID. Third point for me is security. Since the Second World War, we have been living with the false feeling of security. And this false feeling of security we have lost, which is good. I think it's good because it changes our behavior and way of living. Therefore, things which needed to be discussed are things like food security or health security, because also this crisis revealed that we have problems as a region with food security. For example, in the spring, we have been lacking certain type of foods from Italy due to the barriers in international transport. Fourth point for me, very important one, is international cooperation. This crisis revealed that international cooperation within EU and within NATO is crucial for the fight with COVID, and that we all need to be part of some international platforms. This is true also in the situation that we have better access to vaccination and a better opportunity to get vaccines than in situation that we would have been acting as separate countries in this process. And the last one is our investments. We have even though we have crisis, we can take up this crisis as an opportunity, and it's very much connected with a Green Deal and new EU budget. And we should aim for smart investments to recover from COVID. And the smart investments should, of course, be aimed at environment. So we have a unique opportunity to come up with smart investments, which can help to not only to transform our economics, but also to help our environment. So from my side, those are 5 important things, which are not only important for the Czech Republic, but I do think that they are important for all Visegrad and also EU countries.
Thank you very much. Also bringing the wider context into the view. We will certainly tackle that as well. Like around 5 points: sustainability, trust, security, international cooperation, and smart investments as the biggest point going forward. Let's move a bit to Poland, Mr. Śliwowski. Maybe is the situation in Poland somewhat specific in terms of socioeconomic conditions and the scope of the hate of that the country is currently experiencing? Poland scored better than many countries in the last economic crisis in 2009. Of course, this crisis is very different in the nature, it's structurally different. What would your biggest concerns be and your mapping of the situation when it comes to winners and losers so far?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I could definitely agree that in the previous economic downturn during the financial crisis, and then subsequent economic crisis in the Eurozone, Poland was performing relatively well, and to some extent this is repeating right now during the Corona crisis. Of course, what is not repeating is that our GDP fell for the first time in the 30 years period. So for the first time after the communism collapsed, we experienced basically in 2020 the fall of the GDP. But what our macro department in Polish Economic Institute prognoses is that in 2021 we will once again experience GDP growth. And between 2019 2022, our economy will grow around 5%. So we are not experiencing the profound crisis, rather the slowdown. So we will reach the level of the growth in 3 years, which would basically took us 1 year to occur had not the pandemics evolved. So basically, if I would like to stick to the title of our debate, so who are the winners and who are the losers of the situation? So let's maybe start from losers. So definitely there are sectors in Polish economy which are highly struck by the restrictions. And these concentrates in the hotel, catering and restoration services. So basically they are not allowed to operate in full capacity. Majority of these companies have to shut down. Some of them could operate in the limited capacity. So the economic consequences of pandemic restrictions concentrates within these sectors. Of course, we speak about entertainment sector, for example, all the theaters, cinemas, events, and so on. So basically, they are losing up to 90% of their income in comparison to 2019. And the third sector is airline sector. So our airline airline movement declined also by 80–90%. So these are the 3 sectors that were severely hit by the crisis, by the restrictions. But what's good, what is the good in this bad situation is that these sectors are not influencing heavily the whole structure of Polish economy. So it's a bad situation for the company owners, it's the bad situation for the sectors themselves, but the percentage of Polish economy which is covered by these sectors is not as big as in any other countries. For example, in Southern Europe, where the same sectors are much heavier in, they mean much more in the structure of the economy. So we see that these sectors are definitely losers of the pandemic time, but happily this does not translate into bigger problems in the whole economy. And at the same time, we have definite winners. So, for example, when we look at the macro data from the late months of the last year of 2020, we experienced something which was really unexpected if we compare from our expectations from the beginning of the pandemic in March. So we experienced the growth of the export. So Polish production, which is destination is to export, which is exported into our external partners. It actually grew, and it grew faster. Even if we look at the trends, at the pre-pandemic trend. So the numbers we experienced in the late November of the exported goods are higher than they should be if we just extrapolated the trend from pre-pandemic. Why is it so? We guess that when in the all surrounding economies, in our worldwide partners, people tend to restrict their service consumption. So they stayed at homes, they were not able to consume as much services as usual. They somewhat switched towards goods consumption. And Polish economy is heavily influenced by the productive sector. So the things like furniture, household appliances, all the electric stuff that we produce, and similar stuff. The consumption of such goods increased. We see this also in Polish, in data from Polish stores. For example, household appliances stores had bigger sales, had bigger incomes in comparison to pre-pandemic times. And the same was with the export industry. So we experience higher export that we should experience without the pandemic. And the third, second and the third winners are basically the same as any other place in the world. So the e-commerce sector and parcel delivery and courier sector. So the growth, the increase of spending in these sectors is significant. So basically, to sum up, we have winners, we have losers, but basically majority of economic forecasters in the scenario with smoothly implementing of vaccination policies, they foresee that the economy will grow in the 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much for analyzing the macroeconomic impacts on Poland of the pandemic. Let's now move to Hungary. Hungary had also had different situation still. In 2009, it was pretty hardly hit. What are maybe in Hungary the biggest revelation about the social and economic realities in the light of the pandemic, Ms. SCHARLE?
Right. Let me first reflect on what I heard about Poland and the Czech Republic. So the overall picture seems more similar to the Czech experience and less similar to the Polish one. So the overall fall in GDP was roughly similar to what the Czech Republic experienced. In terms of winners and losers, Hungary had a similar story. So we had the usual suspects, tourism and catering suffering the most, as well as transport. And we also see this pattern of large exporters losing less than the others, and also so typically the Hungarian losers are smaller domestic-owned firms in services, and especially in what we call other services, including entertainment and personal services, etc. And yes, probably as I don't think that was mentioned before, but construction also weathered the crisis relatively well, obviously, because in March and April we had they could work outside in open space. Let me also add that I see a problem with the availability of data. So whatever we say depends on aggregate statistics so far, and some micro studies that tell the story of what happened at the micro level, which is, I think, the most important aspect or dimension in this crisis. But the aggregate statistics are not very good at capturing what's going on, because we had lots of some new phenomena. So just to give you an example, if you look at aggregate employment figures in Hungary, you see a fall of around 3 percentage points during the first phase of the pandemic. But in reality, if you adjust for the actual number of hours worked, the fall is twice that big. It's around 6 percentage points. And the reason why is that something around 11% of the labor force went on holidays in the middle of the spring, when we usually don't go on holidays. And the other half, I mean, another 10% roughly went on shorter working hours or didn't work at all, or was fired. So, and this is not reflected in the overall unemployment or end employment figures. Maybe I would like to go on and discuss social impacts, but we could perhaps come back to that in the next round of questions.
Right. Yeah, we can definitely address that afterwards. Ms. LETOVANEC, Slovakia situation was in the pandemics was somehow specific also given the fact that the onset of the pandemic happened in the midst of transfer of power here after the elections. In your view, what structural weaknesses of the state in delivering basic services and the ability to respond to crisis we have witnessed in Slovakia?
As you mentioned, right, basically we were probably the only government in the V4 and broader space which faced the government change in the late February election, and then in mid-March constitution of the new government, and the new program manifesto was basically approved. And this happened in this, I would say, in the starting phase of the first wave of the corona crisis, which had two impacts, I would say, on the Slovak citizens and the situation here. The one is that, of course, usually the theory says that the new government needs more 6 months, like a starting or firing period, just to accommodate to the new role. And our government didn't have any time. They had to deal with the outcome of the corona crisis, both in terms of health, so positive cases, as well as regarding the economic turmoil which we see here in Slovakia. The thing is that at the beginning of the first waves, also when we go to the macroeconomic numbers, the forecasts were more dramatic than the end of an actual outcome of the 2020. The first projections were about 10% deficit of GDP. Now the last forecast and the numbers from the National Bank speak about only 6%. The inflation was in 2020 still on rise. So basically, we see that Slovakia was not hardly hit from the macroeconomic standpoint of view, and actual numbers are better than the projections at the beginning. So far so good. However, the crisis showed us three weak points, and I would say, and I would actually put them into the three losers of Slovak outcome. And basically, this is the first one is the Slovak health sector, where we see basically that we have a huge problem, not with equipment or beds or whatsoever in hospitals. The Slovak problem is the healthcare personnel. We do not have enough skilled personnel to battle this corona crisis. Of course, nobody was prepared for such a pandemic. Our last pandemic plans were related to influenza pandemic. So yes, we had to prepare new plans and accommodate to the new situation as the rest of the world. However, the shortage of healthcare personnel is very well aware. We are aware of that from 2010. So we are still somehow, and we saw what happens if there are no reforms implemented during the growth time, and now we very much fight with this. So healthcare personnel are they are the first losers for me from this pandemic. The second one basically shows how much Slovakia needs the reform of long-term care, because we also see how, of course, the situation was somehow affecting also the social sector. Slovakia has now, when we speak about the current numbers, one of the highest rate of deaths per 100,000 inhabitants when we speak about the corona crisis. So yes, of course, this is the second, for me, this is the second area where Slovakia was somehow missing the point for reforms. And the third one is, of course, the education and our kids and their access towards the education. In the first wave, we saw that digitalization is still a huge problem in 2021 for Slovakia, or 2020. We had more than 52,000 kids unable to connect to distance learning in the first wave. The current numbers are still not available. So digitalization is definitely, or the education sector overall is one of the biggest losers of this pandemic. And this is directly connected towards for example, to women workforce in place, of course, because this is affecting the overall situation of the income of the families. But I see very much one winner in Slovakia during the pandemic, and I have to say that Slovak academia and Slovak scientists proved to be a crucial player in Corona time, because even though Slovak research and science is very much underfinanced in the Slovak budgets, in the Slovak budget in the past and in the budget in the past, we were able, our scientists from the group of scientists under the Slovak Science and Academia were able to come up with a COVID-19 test, Mr. Čekan and multiplex ID, that were, these gentlemen and ladies were able to come up with the products which is a product which is able to track the coronavirus. And I think that in Slovakia, especially, they are the #1 winners of the pandemic. And I don't know whether to reflect on the rest of my speakers, but one of the things which one of the points that I think are very important for Slovakia in this time, and reflecting Ms. Nerudová, is the trust of the government, because especially in Slovakia, we saw during the entire 2020, and it's continuing into 2021, that we have very much lack of predictability in decision making and high degree of improvisation. And this has and this is mostly connected towards the immediate response phase, when the government has to respond on the development of the corona crisis. And this approach is somehow negatively affecting the effectiveness of the measures which are approved and implemented.
Thank you so much, Ms. Letovanec. So we have, with your contribution, we have moved more beyond macroeconomics, beyond concrete sectors and how hard they were hit, more into the really social fabric of our societies, and the ability of the political class and of the government to reflect on those changes and challenges within the society, as healthcare and education. Maybe it will be interesting also to hear from our other speakers what's the situation in their countries when it comes to these sectors, and to how the governments were able to be supportive to those who are in the first line of the response. How they were able to tackle the support for the healthcare sector and for education that you rightly mentioned as the sectors that are really under a huge pressure, and were in the past been somehow left underserved. Well, let's put it that way. So, Ms. Nerudová, would you analyze the situation in Czech Republic in a similar way?
Yes, with respect to healthcare, I think that now we are in a bit different situation than in the spring. We have quite robust healthcare system, therefore we have quite high capacity for COVID people. We had discussion like 3 or 4 years ago to reduce the number of beds in the hospitals. And now it seems that even though at like 3 or 4 years ago, it has been considered as a great inefficiency in the system, the fact that we have not been able to make the system more efficient is now a strong side our healthcare system, that we have enough capacity for COVID people, and we are able to clutch the brake just to not fulfill the capacity of the healthcare system. In the spring, of course, there has been lack of everything. However, now because we have a very strong nanotechnological sector in the Czech Republic, and even without a great support, I mean, now at the moment, this nanotechnological sector, of course, has been established with public money, because those are the money which have been invested in research and science, but we had no a special support program for nanotechnological sector, but it has boosted up during the summer, and now the production of nanotechnological sector in the Czech Republic is covering all the needs of the Czech Republic with respect to face mask and the other stuff which is needed in the hospitals. Therefore, this is, I think, a bit different situation than in other countries. Of course, that we are lacking enough human capacity. We have enough beds, but we don't have nurses, we don't have enough doctors who would be able to serve. So people are really overloaded, they are tired. There have been a special program to get more money to these people. However, I think that only half of the promised money really traveled to the people really received it. We had a lot of proclamations how much this workers in the first line will receive, but the reality is that there is a great bunch of people who has been working in the spring in the first lines and still have not received that money. So this is more or less the situation in the Czech Republic now. We have a problem with the logistic of vaccinations. We are behind. We have a great delay with establishments of vaccination centers. We don't have enough medical materials. So again, the situation is the similar as in spring. We have to buy those things in China instead of in European Union. Maybe if we would have strategic plan and if we would start to prepare in the summer, maybe we would be able to leave this money in the European Union, in the European market, or in the Czech economics. Now we have to buy it in China again. And of course, we have a great discussion in the Czech Republic regarding the vaccination strategy and the fact that who is guilty, whether the European Union or the Czech government. So we as the scientists trying to talk in the public space about the fact that each of the member states was free to ask for vaccinations, that there was one huge contract which was done by the EU, but every country could ask for number of vaccination, and it was decided by the governments, not by the EU. So now we are trying to again fight with the fake news about the fact that the vaccination is the fail of the EU, which is not true, of course. So this is something which we are currently in the health sector are dealing with in the Czech Republic.
Thank you. I would like to encourage you, if you hear anything you will like to react to, just give me a signal, raise your hand and you can. And also I would like to encourage our audience to pose questions if they already have some. Ms. Scharle, you mentioned social policies. Of course, the national social policy safety nets are under a huge pressure these days. Do you believe that this experience with this pandemic will somehow lead to a shift or an evolvement of those social policies that will make them more prepared to deal with future crises, more fair, perhaps? Do you see any sign of that being taken into account?
No, to be short, but if I may, I would like to first react to what Miriama told us about the developments in the education sector in Slovakia. Because in Hungary, we saw fairly similar developments, or well, it wasn't a positive thing, so I'm not sure if I should call that development, but we saw that schools were not prepared for the digital transformation, but or at least not overnight, which is what they were expected to. So the Prime Minister announced on a Friday that from Monday on, all schools will move to digital mode. And what happened was that this increased the disparity of good and bad schools, or more advanced and modernized schools and less advanced schools, and typically at the expense of disadvantaged students who very often didn't have access to IT. But to mention something positive, I think there was one interesting and very positive outcome out of this in the case of Hungary, which was that the awareness of the general population of the importance of schooling and also of the value of the work of teachers increased greatly. So basically, parents who had to do homeschooling at home and had to actually open the textbooks of their kids and see what they were doing, suddenly understood how much is going on in schools and the high level of expertise that teachers should have to be able to perform their tasks. And I think this might be lasting in the sense that there might be probably more pressure from the general public that we pay our teachers better, because this is a long-standing problem in Hungary, that teachers are underpaid and the quality, the average quality of teaching staff in schools is not as high as it should be. So that might be a positive outcome. Now, turning to what you have asked of the social safety nets, I would first like to just reflect on again the immediate phenomena that we observed, and perhaps come back to future options later on. So I think the big lesson in Hungary was the important role of municipalities. So somewhat similarly to what we heard about the Czech Republic in the ineffective number of beds in healthcare, in Hungary we have an ineffectively high number of social government or of local governments, and the municipal system is highly fragmented. Each little village has their own mayor and their administration, and I think in this crisis this actually proved helpful, because we had at least one level of government that was very close to people and was able to help and was able to see the problems. So otherwise the healthcare and education system, and to some extent the social welfare system, is over centralized, and the government was just too far and too slow to react to local problems. So municipalities took on a lot to basically to make up for what the government wasn't doing. So for example, for kids who couldn't who didn't have IT equipment at home, some schools allowed them to visit the school or rented some equipment to these families. The schools also, or the local governments in many places also organized for kids to have their school meals delivered to their homes, because otherwise they wouldn't have had any cooked meals. Municipalities did a lot in elderly care as well. So I think that was all positive. The only negative dimension in that was the lack of support from the central government. So I think the Hungarian government didn't use this opportunity to basically to allocate more money to municipalities to enable them to do what they should be doing. And this didn't happen. So municipalities didn't have, so they had the resources in terms of human capacity, but they didn't have the money in many cases. And that one lesson for the future there, I think, is that probably we need to strengthen the mechanisms that allocate more money to disadvantaged areas. So there should be an automatic mechanism for that. So it shouldn't be left to individual decisions of governments. They can choose who they favor when they allocate money, but there should be a much stronger mechanism that gives more to the poor municipalities and less to the rich ones, so that we can we can react much faster to such crises. I should stop there and leave the floor to it.
Thank you very much. You mentioned a very interesting point that concerned municipalities and their role in managing of the pandemics. It's an issue that is really discussed here in Slovakia as well, especially given the mass testing that has already happened and is going to happen once again. Maybe Ms. Letovanec can elaborate on that a bit later, but I would like to pass the floor now to Ms. Slivovsky. We have also mentioned digitalization. You mentioned that in your introduction, and other speakers mentioned that as well in terms of education system. Do you believe the pandemic will somehow speed up the digitalization process, or is this just a temporary thing that will again somehow go back to the way they were, especially the digitalization of the educational process? This is something that will, do you believe that will be speeded up, and e-government maybe as well?
Thank you, and thank you very much for the previous stories from the three countries, because in many points I could agree, and problems mentioned by the ladies are similar to what we experienced in healthcare or education systems in Poland. So these are the common problems for the Visegrad countries. But coming back to your question, I no simple answer like yes or no. Like there is no answer like yes, the digitalization will speed up and there is no step back. Neither there is an answer that we will get back to what was in the past. First of all, we have to remember that, for example, when we speak about the remote work, so the possibility to do the teleworkable the tasks that are performed by the staff employed in our companies. In Poland, we calculated that the level, the part of the employees that could do the work remotely, it is less than 40%. It is more about 1 in 3 employees could do their tasks remotely. So still we could see that as far as the structure of our economy is concerned, we are far from reaching the point in which you can easily do all the work remotely. So this is the first point. So we should rather look in a more longer term than let's say 1 year or 2. The second point is that when you look at the human capital side, so when we look about digital competences which are indispensable for switching to remote work or more digital services, we are still lagging behind. So all the 4 countries that we are speaking about today have the lower level of this digital economy index, which European Commission calculates and publish each year. And the Poland is even behind all the 3 other Visegrad countries. So still there is a lot to do in terms of educating people, not only the school kids, but also the older cohorts of people. So this is so first we face structural challenges. Secondly, we face people's challenges and people's capacities challenges to smoothly go through this digital transformation. And as far as we speak about education, my view is a bit different. So I do not necessarily see the rapid and total digitalization as something extremely good for the schools. We had this famous quote by the New York governor who asked, why all these buildings, why all this stuff, when we could easily switch to all this remote schooling, yes, during the pandemic, and he was launching the initiative to move online with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So when we look at what scientists say about how people learn, how pupils learn, and what are the good parts of sitting in the classroom, interacting with your peers, what the school gives you in this traditional way, it is much more than just the competence transmission. Yes, so you earn much more being in the building with your peers, with your teachers, in comparison to when you are in your home and you are remotely learning. So I think that, and we see this in the pandemic. Yes, we see that apart from infrastructural problems, for example, in Poland there are calculations that 100,000 pupils do not have access to good internet connection or all the hardware which is indispensable for the smooth learning. You have all the other deficits of remote learning, like for example, when you speak about the poorer side of the society, schools in Poland provide free meals, for example, for pupils, which were to some extent lost during the times. We have all these issues related to psychological safety, to psychological work which is done with the students which have some problems. Schools also have this equalizing role. When all the research that is gathered during the pandemic shows that when you have well-educated parents which are able to help you during the remote learning, you gain much more than when you compare yourself with the pupils which, for example, have parents who have to work at their offices or their sites. So they are not able to help you because either they don't have time or they don't have personal capacities to help you. So in my view, we have to acknowledge that we are facing the digital economy, that we are moving towards this 4.0 industry, and we have to expand our capacities. But we have to be very vigilant, and we have to acknowledge that traditional school has also its values, and we should rather strengthen this instead of switching to the new model. So
thank you very much.
That would be my point.
I've seen Ms. SCHARLE wanted to react.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that, at least for myself, speaking for myself, I wouldn't want to say that teaching or education should go fully digital. I just try to explain what happened in Hungary when education had to go online, which wasn't a choice. It was a necessity to stop the pandemic. But I think it's important that to say that we need a combination now. We need traditional school combined with digital methods, which could be used within the classroom, like smart blackboards or whiteboards and the other tools. Partly because the kids are themselves digital. I mean, they are born with their iPhones in their hands, and they can relate a lot more to what happens in school if the teacher uses digital tools. And partly because there's a host of technologies that you can bring in to enhance information and demonstrating things in a digital way. And also because digitalization also could offer teachers a lot more support, both coming from a central educational authority and both from their peers, which is actually what happened in Hungary. So one nice or positive developments was that since teachers didn't get much help from the government. They set up their own self-help groups and on Facebook and other social media, and there was a lot of exchange of ideas and methods, which I think is actually a huge opportunity, because if you think of the cost of sharing methodology and teaching materials 50 years ago when everything was on paper, and compare it to today when you can just send it on email or work together on some in the cloud. There are huge opportunities in sharing teaching materials and basically bringing everybody up to at least a minimum level of teaching quality at a much lower cost. So I think we should explore that and use that opportunity.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Let's maybe address your two questions that have already arrived. The first one is directed to Ms. NERUDOVÁ, and I will read it just for our viewers online. I really appreciate you mentioned the necessity of sustainable economic model. Are there already any concrete suggestions on how to approach this transition in the Czech Republic?
Even before COVID crisis, I have been on the board of H2020 consortium called Fair Tax, and one of our tasks was to come up with the measurement of the sustainability. We created some model for measuring of the sustainability, and based on this model, we are trying to set up a discussion. I think it's very much connected with the initiative Beyond the GDP. This is the initiative which is not new. This is something which exists more than 10 years already. And we are doing the examples and trying to persuade people that GDP is not the indicator which is correctly reflecting the well-being of the population. Because even though your country is growing 5% of GDP a year, you still can be living in the countryside with no water, no access to drinkable water, or you can live in the party or in the country where there is a heavy industry and air pollution, and your quality of life is very low. Therefore, we are talking about something like that. We need to bring the limits of our planet into our economic model. That's the way we are thinking and trying to set up a discussion in the Czech Republic. And I have also one comment with respect to the education and the digitalization as being director of the university. I think that we have to have in mind the diversity of the problems. Yes, I do agree that there are extreme problems with this situation and this online learning for first and second grade for grammar schools, because if you look on the access to high-speed internet in the countries, there are great differences among the regions, and of course that the kids from the groups or from the social groups have the problems to access the computers and everything. But I think that we also need to take into account the universities, because this digitalization is the revolution on the universities, because the change, which normally would take like 5 or 6 years, now we have the change after 6 months. We have the change, and my university have now 2 possibilities. We have like hybrid learning, therefore we are prepared for face-to-face learning and we are prepared for online. And everybody knows what to do, and we can quite easily to switch. So we are really prepared. Of course that we have study programs as medicine or chemistry or forestry, when you need to go out, you need to go with the students to the labs and so on. Of course, this is a problem. But I think that this on the universities, especially in V4, it's the possibility how to increase the quality of learning. How? It's extremely easy to get a foreign expert to be part of an online course, because it's cost nothing. Normally, you would pay money for him to travel. He would have no time to travel, but now it's just about switching on Zoom or Teams for 45 minutes, like this. And it can really increase the quality of university education. And I do believe in it. And it's a great opportunity for V4 countries in general, this situation.
Thank you very much. We have another question, and of course, you can react to what was said also before. But I would like to put a question out there. The EC Health Commissioner stated recently that she does not know any other countries than Hungary that has requested a Chinese vaccine. What is the position in other V4 countries towards Chinese and Russian vaccines? So maybe if you could just tackle that very briefly. MIRIAMA, LETOVANEC, maybe you can start.
With a response to this question?
Yes, and if you have any comments to anything that was before. I mean, as far as I know, Slovakia is not thinking on procuring Chinese.
I have the same information that we are not thinking about the import of any of the Chinese vaccine. As the rest of my speakers mentioned, also we are also behind with respect to the vaccination of the population here. Yes, we have the same battles as mentioned by Ms. NERUDOVÁ, that it's the problem of the EU and opposite to the government's reaction. The newspaper is full of the headlines today that it came up this morning that who's in charge of that. I would say that we do not, until recently, we didn't have a proper vaccination strategy, because we have this big case of one of the sportsmen here in Slovakia who got a vaccine prior to the critical infrastructure here. And now, I mean, they're struggling with the explanation of how it happened and how it might be explained. I don't feel and I don't think that just one voluntary exercise in the hospital is the right feedback on such a thing. That's why in behavioral economics, there is a number of approaches how to tackle this issue, especially also the American economists are speaking about that. And this is for the later stage of the vaccination, not for this one, when we need to get vaccinated, the critical infrastructure. But of course, also probably in your countries, we have like high resistance toward the vaccination here in Slovakia. These anti-vaxxers and hoaxes are full of social media. At the end of last year, it was basically about 60% of people who didn't want to get vaccinated. Now it's slightly decreasing. I think the right number these days is about half of the population. So basically, there are different nudges and models of charities and lotteries, how the ordinary people here in the country might be vaccinated if there is the amount of vaccine at the end of the day available. Because I think that this is also one of the issues that we are discussing these days, that of course once there is somebody from doctors or other critical infrastructure who can be today as proposed and planned to be vaccinated, there should be a reserve list for people who might be vaccinated that day, so we do not waste the vaccines at the end of the day. Of course, elderly people who are in the first line, the firemen, policemen, and so on, should be vaccinated as well. But I think that for increasing the trust of the government in their plan and their strategy, would be nice if also the people who are not like influencers and the sportsmen have the access on some like strict rules, have the access towards the vaccination as well.
Thank you. In Poland, are there any plans to somehow distribute the portfolio of vaccines outside those being provided by the European procurement?
No, for the time being, there haven't been discussions the public debate about such possibilities. Our government is still referring to this Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, and there have been this slowdown during the recent days due to these reconstruction works in one of the construction sites in Belgium. But still, we are mainly in this zero phase when we are vaccinating critical staff, and in the following days we are switching to this elderly group to vaccinate them. So there are no discussions about Chinese or Russian vaccines whatsoever in Poland till now.
Thank you very much. In Czech Republic.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't able to unmute. Well, there is no discussion about the possibility of Russian or Chinese vaccine because, of course, that we have a European this European body which is authorizing the vaccines which can be used in the EU. So there is no discussion, and I haven't heard about any efforts to introduce this in the Czech Republic. It's necessary to say that it's of course, or in case that any country of the EU would like to establish or to bring this Chinese and Russian vaccine into the country, its national body would have to approve it. And I think it's, with respect to legal consequences, it's really, it's difficult. Therefore, I don't expect that Czech Republic would go in that direction.
Ms. Szarle, do you see this really rolling out in Hungary?
It's hard to tell what will actually, or what is actually happening. There's a lot of discussion about it, and the whole issue seems to be part of the government strategy to show that the EU is ineffective and the Hungarian government is efficient and they are saving us, etc. But there's very little reliable information on what exactly is the government doing, behind the doors. So. We don't know. We're hoping for the best, and the EU, the other countries of the V4, but that this is not on your agenda.
Right. What could maybe be interesting to address, and what I would like to ask you, it concerns the crisis management in your countries as such, how it is playing out and how it is organized. I mean, to what extent are expert data being really fed in the final decision making? Whether you have the feeling that the decision making and the management of the pandemics is really being managed based on reliable expert data, or whether it's much more influenced by some political deliberation, and whether it's more strategic or it's much more an improvisation. Oftentimes, this is a debate that we're, of course, having here in Slovakia, and it may be interesting to hear what is the situation in the other countries as well. Maybe I'll start with MIRIAMA, LETOVANEC, maybe some remarks on the situation in Slovakia.
Well, I mentioned it at the beginning of my my speech that basically, as somebody who has the experience and being, like very close to the Prime Minister in the past, I mean, the tools how to do a good decision-making process are in place. So we do not have to develop like a new tools how to make decisions, because of course we worked very hard last three and a half years to prepare a good database for decision makers to make their decisions. So I guess we have data, we collect data. However, once the decision is going to be made, I would say if they are, presented, they are not heavily taken into account recently. All of us were kind of what we were watching the situation in December, where almost everybody here in the country, including scientists, analysts, even the president of the Slovak Republic, who were calling for a more harsh lockdown in Slovakia. It came, but it came after a huge, I would say, media pressure. That this approach is one of the right ones how to tackle the issue. Of course, we have also the experience of mass testing in this country. Especially there was one in November. Now we are going under the second phase of mass testing, basically since yesterday, the day before. The decision about this came very late. It was presented Sunday evening, and it was supposed to start Monday morning. We know that the first mass testing, and that's why I was raising hand when we spoke about local governments, was successful only because of the work and the effort of the local governments. I mean, they were the ones, once they didn't receive a good direction from the government, and they were able to secure all the resources, even the personal and material ones. So if we speak about the strategy and decision-making process, I would say that the Slovak government is still in the learning phase. I would say how to deal with the issue and how the state apparatus works and all. And of course, we would be more grateful if more data is presented before the decision is made, not only just talking about the curve and the situation that is worsening, but for example, even if we talk about, when we talked about the kids' schools and digitalization, basically, we still don't know whether schools are the places where the coronavirus is transferred the most. And it might help also to make decisions and to understand the decisions of the government, why Slovak kids are basically staying home from last March with one short break. And I think it would help the government to be more trustworthy in their decisions and all the plans that we are basically listening right now.
Thank you so much. Ms. Nerudová, what is the situation in Czech Republic and the way the crisis is managed, the way expert data are being used and the decisions are being based on them or not?
Well, honestly to say, we are not the country which would be able to use all the data which is collecting from all the researches we are doing. So we have a problem with the access to the informations. We have problem with knowledge-based decision making. Therefore, even though countries like Italy or France are able to have accessible data for scientists, how many people have been vaccinated each day, in which age group, in which region. This is the data we are not getting every day. So this is something we are urging the government, we as the scientists, every day, that I have to say that a lot of decisions are populistic and are not based on data or knowledge. That's all what I can say. I'm sorry to say it like this, but I think this is the most best description of current situation we are living in the Czech Republic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Slivovský.
Yes, so I could mainly speak about the processes in which, to some extent, our institute has been involved in the recent weeks, because basically, of course, there are, let's say, different strands of decision making. There is, of course, the task force in the government which deals with the restrictions, and there are not only the ministers but also the scientists. As far as I know, the medical staff is being invited to such meetings, and they are asked for their opinions. Of course, there are different units, for example, in the Ministry of Education to discuss such things, but our institute cooperates most closely with the Prime Minister Office. So from the very beginning of the pandemics, we have been asked to collect and to provide them with quite high frequency data. So as Ms. AGOTA SCHARLE told at the beginning, we had some challenging times in the March to collect the data which goes beyond simple aggregates, which goes beyond national official registers. So we were able to collect some credit card data from credit card providers, which is of course we are not able to publish it officially because there are many legal aspects around protecting such data, but it gives us a bit more overview what's going on in the consumption, in the people's consumption processes. We were able to collect data from the Ministry of Finance because in recent years we had a huge reform of it was the aim of this reform was to reduce the tax fraud. So more and more tax data, even high frequency data, was collected through ministry agencies. So they have data on cash transfers and so on what is going on in companies' registers. So we've been able to work with this data, and of course, as many other analysts, we use the data from Google mobility records and from data about how trucks are commuting inside Poland to look how the logistics is cooperating. So we've been collecting, analyzing, and sending this data during first wave almost daily, then with the less frequency, but as far as our experiences are concerned, there was a need from the government to get some more data beyond what's published in official registers quarterly. And as far as the broader situation in Poland is concerned, and as far as the expert involvement in decision making is concerned, because to some extent this is the matter of my interest, I'm writing the PhD about using expertise in public policy making. So it's always the case that if you have such a situation like pandemics, then there is a case how much you can rely your decisions on evidence, because if you look at the evidence, at the scientific evidence in a classic way, there is not so much robust evidence which can describe what you can do or what you should do in such times, because you deal with the high uncertainty, you deal with the situations in which you have to take decisions quite often without available data. So I think that, of course, we would all want more and more decisions to be taken based on the data, but in some cases, simply there was no robust evidence, and we are still discussing, for example, why we have closed restaurants, bars, and gyms. And many people from the public, they say that there is no such evidence that the transmission occurs in such places, and you can still show those people all the reports, all the peer-reviewed or not yet peer-reviewed working papers from around the world that shows that these are precisely the places in which the transmission has the highest rate. And still there is a huge group of publics that denies this evidence, and you have all these political discussions around such things. So I think that in Poland the overview, the whole picture is mixed. But as far as economic decisions are taking into account the government was directly asking for data to use it in their decision making.
Thank you so much. Ms. Scharle, the experience of Hungary in the respect of policy making based on data.
Yes, briefly. The situation is, I think, similar to what Ms. NERUDOVÁ explained about the Czech Republic. So the current government does not rely much on, at least they do not like to rely much on external expertise. They do have their internal experts there. And during this pandemic, I think the only difference was that they did ask for support from virologists. So they set up a team of healthcare experts, and they did listen to them up to some time. So not always. And we did have difficulty, compared to what we saw in Poland, access to data didn't improve much. So researchers did make an attempt to get either administrative data or business data on mobile phone use, etc., but without much success. So the government did not seem to have an interest in that. To say something positive as well, I did see a new development at least in the independent media, which was that we started looking at our neighbors more than we used to for policy, basically for policy advice. So, for example, the mass testing in Slovakia received a lot of attention in Hungarian media, and we also looked at the other countries and how they handle the education lockdown in the education system to get good practices, and this is new. We always, and even if I look at what the government was doing, our Prime Minister always stressed that we look at what Austria is doing, and he would rarely mention the other countries, but the independent media did.
Thank you very much. We have any question that might be interesting to address? Ms. Scharle already addressed it in writing, but I would like to put it to other speakers as well and for our audience online. I'll read it out. The Hungarian government has provided some wage subsidies and very limited income support to unemployment people during the economic crisis. At the same time, it has dedicated significant budgetary resources to investment promotion and various other projects, arguing that government investments and new foreign direct investments will strengthen the economy in the medium term. All governments have been forced to increase deficit spending during the economic downturn. Is there a tension or a debate about more direct income support to boost consumption now and support to investments whose impact will be felt only later? Thank you very much. It was meant for all the panelists. So I don't know who would like to react to this question. Mr. Slivovsky, maybe?
Yes, I can. This is an interesting question. If we are speaking about the public debate, there haven't been such a discussion in Poland. If we, for example, compare it to the discussion which is being held in the US, where they had this direct checks program, and right now within the proposed package, which will be probably implemented by the Biden administration, there is also ideas how to directly support people. In Poland, the support has been through companies. So we had something which was called the anti-crisis shield, and it was constructed in a way that when you directly employ people, when you're, for example, small and medium company, and you have a legal contract with your employees, you can ask governmental institutions to provide you with the money to maintain their payments, so to maintain their positions. And when you start, this is more like credit or loan, But if you manage to maintain this position, this employee position for which you have been granted the loan till the end of 2021, then this loan, a large part of this loan could be changed into subsidy. So you will not be have to give it back. So the mechanisms here is to maintain people in employment. So to hibernate staff inside companies, because the idea behind that is that it is easier then to rebound from the crisis where people are still within companies where they still have their working position, instead allowing them to be fired and then helping them find new jobs. So this was the mechanism in Poland. And to finalize, the discussion that was held in Poland was about a broader problem. The economists discussed whether we are able to, or whether we are allowed to change our fiscal rules during the crisis. So there was one huge discussion, and especially driven by younger generation of economists who said that nowadays we don't have to stick to more traditional fiscal rules. We have to go with expansionary fiscal policy. We have to increase public investment during the time of crisis. We cannot cut expenditure like it happened during 2008-2009 times in Eurozone. And then when the economy rebounds, we will have to discuss once again about the fiscal situation of the country. So this was one side of the discussion, but at the same time there were numerous economists who opposite this view, and they said that still the fiscal rules, the spending has to be taken in consideration quite strongly, and we still have to look at the limits of debt on public debts in relation to GDP. So this discussion was much more pronounced in the media in Poland in comparison to the types of support for employees.
Thank you. Ms. Nerudová, do you register any major debate on incentives to boost spending in Czech Republic?
Well, we already had a discussion in the spring. The government announced the injection into the economics. It was 1.2 billion Czech crowns. However, at the end of this year, it turned out that it was just a promise, that in reality, only 18% from this amount has been spent. Regarding the support for the business sector, I have to say that more or less we are suffering the same problems as I heard from Pavel, because currently we have a discussion regarding the unemployment. Czech Republic has the lowest unemployment in the EU, only 4%, but we need to transform the economics, and these support programs, as Pavel said, are just keeping the employees on the positions which will not exist after this crisis, because those jobs will be transformed. Therefore, we are discussing that we need a Kurzarbeit, which is the German program which helped in 2008 German economics to recover from the crisis, and it's based on the fact that it is forcing the employees to requalify, to change the job. And this is currently which is lying on the table in the parliament, and the business sector is really pressing the government to approve this program as soon as possible. And secondly, we have a huge discussion in the public space regarding the support, because we diverged from Germany and Austria. We have sectoral small programs. And if we have a sectoral small programs, we have a type of businesses which does not receive a support at all. Therefore, we are forcing government to change these sectoral supportive programs to general programs, which would be based on decrease of turnover in comparison with the last year, and which would subsidize businesses like 50% from the turnover, and also which will subsidize fixed costs. because this is the way Germany goes, that Germany is subsidizing fixed costs. It's extremely important for the businesses who are running businesses in their own premises, not in rented premises. And all our supportive programs now are based on the fact that that the businessmen are not running businesses in their own premises. So they are subsidized payment of rent, which is discrimination, because great deal of businesses are running business in their own premises. So this is the discussion we currently have in the Czech Republic. So to sum up, there have been huge promises in spring, and at the end of the year, it turned up that only 18% from the promised support was injected into the economics of the Czech Republic.
Thank you. Well, we are running out of time, but I would still like to make a final, very quick round with all of you on a question that if you had a possibility and if you could have one wish for the way the recovery plans and recovery strategies are being shaped in your countries, what would be your one recommendation be that you maybe feel now is not really reflected in the debates and in the plans and in the strategies? I know it's not an easy question, but if it can be just very brief to sum up our debate. Miriam Letovanec, maybe if I may start with you.
Very quickly, in a couple sentences, I would be very wishful for Slovakia to have finally the strategy till 2030 or 2050. So we all finally know where we want to be in the upcoming years, because we are still doing these short-term moves in the 4-year cycles, I would say, the political cycles. And whenever there is any strategy or reform implemented, then it's reversed by the next government. So yes, I would like to see the strategy, long-term strategy for Slovakia. And with respect to the reforms plans regarding the EU funding, this resilience and recovery fund, I hope that our government would be more ambitious, and as it is right now with the plan we submitted to European Commission.
Thank you very much. Ms. SCHARLE.
Right. We haven't talked much about social policies, so maybe I'd focus on that in my last contributions. So what I would wish for is that the Hungarian government would set up a proper minimum income scheme which covers all who need it and is more generous than the current very limited flat rate benefit system. And also that this scheme would be run by some sort of a local level government rather than a centralized government structure, and that it is somehow combined with the capacity of NGOs and the general public to offer volunteer work, which I think is a great asset during the crisis, and it should be used and should be systematically included in our welfare system.
Thank you very much. Mr. Slivovský.
Yes, as always, there is no simple answer for that, because some of the problems we were discussing here are more of structural problems. Yes, for example, when we speak about the shortage of staff in healthcare sector, this is nothing that we can address in a few months time. So basically, we would like to advise to also focus on the structural reforms and to look in a broader perspective, not only to the perspective of these few months ahead. But of course, there are issues related to labor market. So, for example, in Poland, there is a huge debate, as always, that people doing similar stuff in companies could be employed based on 3 or 4 different contractual schemes, which then impact how much they contribute in taxes and social security payments, and how wide the social protection they could receive in times of the crisis. So this could be possibly addressed to simplify such issues, to deal with, for example, how high is the taxation of work in these lower income quartiles, so to help these people to boost their employability and such things. So I think that we also will have to face what has been told, that some of the works, some of the placements that have been secured still will not be viable during the recovery phase, and these people will finally move toward unemployment. So working with them in a new way, because how we work with unemployed people, how we help them find employment, how we work with boosting their competences and qualifications still requires huge changes in Poland. So this issue as well should be addressed during this recovery phase. And because we didn't speak about that, I hope that all these green transformation issues will have a huge part in our recovery package. Just to mention, there are 2 or 3 days during which in Poland we speak equally frequently about clean air problems, because we have now very polluted air inside Polish cities, one of the most polluted air across Europe. So the energy transformation, household heating transformation is still ahead of us, and this should be addressed during these next months.
Thank you very much. We are really running out of time, and Ms. Nerudová should be already leaving. I apologize for that, but still I would like to pass the floors for some really final short remark.
Yeah. Thank you. I will be very short. For me, it's two basic things: the renewal of trust of government into the business towards business, and trust of the society and business towards the government. Without this, it's not possible to restore the economics. Second, we need to create a stable environment for the businesses, which is not currently true. So government needs to contribute to the stability of the environment, and to decrease an administrative burden for the businesses. That's the second crucial thing. And third and fourth, this crisis is an extreme opportunity with respect to European money, the new EU budget, to do 2 basic structural reforms we have not been able to do for the last 30 years, and that's the reform of taxation system and the reform of pension system in the Czech Republic.
Thank you very much. We really used all our time and some minutes extra. I really thank you for your very complex analysis of the realities in your countries. I really thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule work and to be with us and discuss the topic. So I would like to namely thank Ms. Nerudová for being with us, Ms. SCHARLE, Mr. Slivovský, and Ms. LETOVANEC. Thank you very much. And also once again, thanks to our donors, which is International Visegrad Fund, and our project partners. And I still wish you also thank you for the questions that were coming. I hope we answer all of them. And still wish you a very nice days, and hopefully we will meet on some other occasion.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.